My name is Olu Orange. I am a civil rights attorney. I also teach in the political science department at the University of Southern California. A gang injunction is a court order that the court issues, and it basically says that the people who are covered by the gang injunction cannot engage in certain behavior and that they can't associate with certain people. They're used for broad-based profiling and oppression of people in low-income and minority neighborhoods. Basically, Christian Rodriguez had been arrested for being out at night past the gang injunction curfew. And so when I first got his case in criminal court, he was in custody behind bars, and I reviewed the file and looked at the injunction itself, and to me it just looked illegal. And I wondered how in the world any court could enforce such an illegal order. So we challenged it. We won the criminal case, and then I spoke with him and his friend Alberto Cazares, who was arrested with him for the same thing, about challenging it further on civil grounds in federal court as part of a class action, and they agreed to stand up and do it. Challenging it in state court was an option, but we decided to go with federal court because state court judges are too beholden to political elections. They've got to run for re-election, and so you often hear during their campaigns, you know, I was tough on crime. Or if someone is opposing a state court judge, they say, well, this judge wasn't tough on crime. And the word gang and laws against gangs and gang injunctions have been used to demonize people that really have done no wrong. And so what we figured is that if we filed the case in state court, we'd be subject to the quote unquote gang label. And judges who want to penalize people and take harsh stances that has, in any case that has anything to do with a gang. So we went federal.
So when you challenged it federally, was only the curfew aspect of the injunctions challenged?
Yes, that is the only aspect of the injunction that we challenged on a class-wide basis. And the reason is because back in 2007, in the Colonia Chicas case, the California appellate courts themselves said that the curfew provision as written was unconstitutional. As a matter of fact, it was too vague. But what was apparently happening by virtue of the fact that Mr. Rodriguez was sitting in custody for violating this provision is that various law enforcement agencies were still enforcing that same provision. And so as far as challenging it on a class-wide basis where you have to have some uniformity in terms of the wrong that was committed, that was a very clear basis to bring this kind of challenge.
Why are some of the injunctions excluded from this ruling regarding curfews?
Because only about half of the gang injunctions in the city of Los Angeles have the unconstitutional curfew language in them. The other half of the injunctions either have no curfew language, or most of them have curfew language that the courts of appeals in California at least have said is okay. If you look at the communities that gang injunctions are imposed upon, and you look at what they do to those communities and people in those communities, it's reminiscent, in my eyes, very much of the Jim Crow era. You're telling people that they cannot be outside at certain times, that they cannot be with certain people at certain times. All of these people are people that the police department, in its own unfettered discretion, with the exception of those people who are actually named on the injunction that's passed in court, all of those people are people that the police just decide can't do things. When you look at the curfew provision in and of itself, and you're telling people that after a certain hour, usually when it becomes dark, they've got to stay inside. They can't be out in public. Well, that's reminiscent of a sundown town from back in the Jim Crow era, and at least I think as late as the late 50s in Hawthorne, where black folks were told when the sun goes down, don't let us catch you outside in our town. Well, you're doing essentially the same thing with a gang injunction, except for you're telling people not only can they not be in your town, they can't even be outside in their own town. They've got to be in the house. Our two class representatives, Chris and Alberto, It's clear that they're not gang members. As a matter of fact, these two young men who come from the Mar Vista Gardens housing project were both awarded housing authority scholarships so that they could attend college. Yet at the same time, they were served with this gang injunction because the police in that area just for some reason got the idea that they were gang members. And the criteria for determining whether or not someone's a gang member and should be served with the gang injunction is just ridiculous. And so what happens is you get the situation where people who have nothing to do with gangs other than the fact that perhaps a friend may be an associate or a member or a family member or whatever, they get served with the injunction, they get pulled right on in. You can't break the law to enforce it. You cannot disregard constitutional rights and constitutional freedoms with the claim that you want to live freely in this constitutional democracy of a country that we live in. Once you do, then the principle that guides the reality falls apart. A lot of people believe that you can't beat the gang injunction. And that's just false. Gang injunctions have been beaten in various cases throughout the years, but we wanted to do it in a big way and then start taking down the rest of the injunction. And so we're reviewing the other portions of the injunctions now. For example, the association provision keeps people from being within a certain distance of one another or in the presence of one another. So you can have people who are coming from school, who just got let out of the same classroom, who are arrested for a criminal offense for violating the gang injunction. We think that it's a wholly unconstitutional method of enforcing the law, and I intend to go after it.
The best way that I would describe a gang injunction is it treats individuals as if they were on parole without ever having committed a crime.
For each of the properties we have targeted with an abatement action, this is what we're looking for. 1, we're looking for an injunction against the owner seeking comprehensive physical and managerial improvements to rid the property of gang activity.